Tonight, we drift into the strange edges of thought, where logic collapses and truth becomes unsettling. 10 paradoxes, each one darker than the last, not meant to be solved, but felt. Let them wash over you, slowly, quietly, until your mind softens and sleep takes hold. This is not just a video. This is a descent into the deepest questions we dare to ask. Close your eyes. Let's begin. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the edges of reality begin to blur. Tonight, we drift into one of the most haunting questions ever conceived by the human mind. It is a paradox born from physics, but it slips quickly into the unsettling territory of consciousness, identity, and illusion. This is the paradox of the Boltzmann brain. Imagine this. Right now, as you lie in bed, you feel yourself inside a body. You remember your name, your childhood, the people you love, the moments that shaped you. You recall days of joy, moments of confusion, even the memories of previous nights spent pondering big questions like this one. You feel grounded by continuity. But what if all of that was a lie? What if your entire consciousness, your body, your thoughts, your past, just flashed into existence a fraction of a second ago? No past, no parents, no earth, just the sensation of a coherent world. A brain momentarily assembled by chance in the chaos of the universe, containing the illusion of memory, of history, of reality. A Boltzmann brain. The idea is named after physicist Ludwig Boltzmann, who lived in the 19th century and helped shape the foundations of statistical mechanics. Boltzmann explored the idea that order can emerge from chaos, that in a disordered system, occasionally, by random chance, order appears. This idea isn't just theoretical. It explains why molecules in a gas can form patterns, or why entropy, the measure of disorder, is so central to the way the universe evolves. But here's where it gets disturbing. If we take the principles of statistical mechanics seriously, and we assume an infinite or extremely long-lived universe, then everything that can happen, no matter how improbable, eventually will happen, including the sudden, spontaneous formation of a functioning brain, complete with fake memories and a false sense of identity, just long enough to think for a few seconds before dissolving again into cosmic static. Think of a cloud of particles drifting through deep space for eons. For an immeasurable length of time, they collide, combine, separate. Over trillions upon trillions of years, in a moment so unlikely it's nearly impossible, yet still possible. Those particles assemble into a structure identical to your brain, just for a moment, just long enough to think, I exist. And then, it's gone. Here's where the paradox cuts deepest. If you believe the laws of physics and probability, the spontaneous appearance of Boltzmann brains is far more probable than the evolution of conscious beings through billions of years of biological history. That's right. It is statistically more likely for a random collection of atoms to form a single, illusion-holding brain than it is for stars to form, planets to stabilize, life to begin, and consciousness to evolve slowly over time. In fact, if the universe is infinite, there could be infinitely more Boltzmann brains than evolved beings like us, which means you might be one of them. You might be experiencing the only seconds of your existence, falsely convinced you've lived a life you never actually lived. Your memories are just well-arranged noise, the sound of this voice, this narration, fabricated, the sense of a body under your blanket, a temporary hallucination. None of it is real. You are a brain floating in entropy, imagining. Still with me? Let's breathe again. Inhale, exhale. ground yourself, even if grounding is a simulation. This paradox isn't just disturbing because it questions your reality. It's disturbing because it may be the most logical explanation in certain cosmological models. If the universe will last forever, and all physical combinations are eventually realized, then for every conscious being who evolved biologically, there may be untold trillions of disembodied brains that simply flicker into existence. Now ask yourself, what are the odds that you're the real biologically evolved person versus a random blip of fleeting awareness? Some physicists and philosophers argue that if we accept this idea, it leads to absurdity. The idea is so logically horrifying that it threatens to undermine the very foundations of scientific reasoning. Because if we are Boltzmann brains, our logic, our instruments, our observations, they're all unreliable. Science collapses under its own weight. So some use that as an argument against the universe being infinite or eternal in the first place. Others propose that the very low entropy of our current universe suggests that it's not likely a Boltzmann brain scenario. They argue that it's more probable we're living in a structured universe with consistent physical laws and a real evolutionary history, rather than in a blip of chaos that only looks ordered from our subjective perspective. But can you know that? Can you feel certainty from the inside? Here's a further twist. Suppose you are a Boltzmann brain. What then? You only exist for moments. Moments filled with a complete illusion of continuity. You can't escape. You can't change your fate. You can't verify your reality. Even your fear might be fabricated. And here's the final cold sting of the paradox. Even if you are a real being, biologically evolved, living in a real universe, you can never prove you're not a Boltzmann brain, because all evidence you collect could be part of the illusion. Your past, possibly fiction, your thoughts, possibly artificial, the concept of this paradox, possibly the final cruel joke of a decaying mind slipping back into nothing. What does this do to our sense of self? For some, the Boltzmann brain paradox is just a theoretical curiosity, something to ponder and dismiss. But for others, it opens a deep, unsettling canyon beneath our assumptions. It reminds us that identity is fragile, that memory is no guarantee, that existence is not the same as persistence. So let's return to the present moment. You are hearing this now, feeling something now, breathing now. If you are a fleeting spark in chaos, then let that spark burn with awareness. If this is your only moment, then let it be deep and curious and awake. Maybe you are real, maybe you are not, but either way, you are here. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Let your thoughts drift now. Let the edges of your certainty soften. Float with this paradox like a brain in space, weightless, wondering. The universe may be infinite, but this moment is yours. The paradox of the infinite pain machine. Settle into stillness. Let the hum of the world soften. Tonight, we wade into a darker sea of thought, a place not just of uncertainty, but of ethical weight. As your breath rises and falls, allow your mind to open without resistance. For what we're about to explore is not an easy thought, but an important one. Picture this. A machine exists that can deliver pain, not ordinary pain, not momentary discomfort, but an experience of suffering so deep, so complete, that it stretches out into eternity. No breaks, no sleep, no numbness. Pure awareness of anguish, sustained forever. Now imagine the machine is only activated under one condition. to save an unimaginable number of others from moderate pain. Let's say billions of people would avoid stubbed toes, sore backs, and heartbreak if just one person is placed in this machine. One person must suffer eternal torment, so countless others can live with slightly fewer burdens. Do you flip the switch? Most instinctively recoil. The idea of endless pain for one being feels monstrous. But then, the math whispers. Utilitarian logic creeps in. Isn't it worth it, it asks, if one suffers but billions flourish? Isn't that ethical? Welcome to the paradox. It's not just theoretical. It probes the boundaries of moral reasoning. Utilitarianism, a dominant ethical framework, tells us to maximize happiness and minimize suffering. Simple, clear. But what happens when the scales are infinite? This thought experiment pushes utilitarianism into its most terrifying form. It asks, is there a moral limit to how much one can suffer, regardless of how many benefit? If not, we risk justifying horrors. Now reflect on something deeper. The nature of infinity. Eternal pain is not just a very long time. It is timeless. It stretches beyond the lifespan of stars, beyond the heat death of the universe. And if a consciousness is trapped in that machinery, what becomes of ethics, meaning, or even identity? Let's breathe. This is not a machine we can build, but it's a machine our minds can imagine. And the imagination alone is enough to disturb the soul. Think of this. If the universe allows for infinite configurations, if our future technologies can simulate consciousness or extend lifespans, then perhaps such a machine could exist. Perhaps it already does. Perhaps some form of infinite torment is possible in the shadowy corners of theoretical physics or digital philosophy. Here's another angle. Suppose the machine isn't real, but a symbol, a metaphor for any system that justifies the suffering of a few to serve the many. History is filled with them. Economic systems, political regimes, cultural norms. Somewhere, someone always bears the cost. But what if the cost never ends? Would you be the one inside? Could you bear it? Could you ask someone else to? Let's reframe the paradox. Suppose the machine has a button, and if you press it, you become the sufferer. But in doing so, you ensure that no one else ever feels pain again. Ever. Would you press it? Now the paradox touches on sacrifice, on love, on a level of empathy so complete, it dares to challenge the boundaries of self-preservation, to endure eternal pain, so others might be free. Is that noble or insane? In many religious traditions, figures are said to bear the sins or suffering of the world, martyrs, saviors, beings of impossible compassion. This paradox brings that myth to the level of stark choice. A machine, a button, a decision, and then the unsettling twist. What if someone does press it? And worse, what if their suffering is real, but the machine lies? What if the pain is eternal, but the benefit never manifests? What if the bargain is false, or the calculation flawed? In this, the paradox becomes a warning about certainty, about playing God, about the arrogance of assuming one can measure suffering and weigh it on a cosmic scale. Let your mind rest for a moment. Float in the space between extremes. There is something uniquely modern about this paradox. In a world increasingly governed by algorithms, optimization, and data, we risk turning ethics into numbers. But suffering is not numerical. Pain is not quantifiable. Consciousness is not a variable to be managed. The infinite pain machine reminds us, some costs may be too high, some trades cannot be made, no matter the gain, and some beings should never be asked to endure what the mind can barely comprehend. But still, the question remains, if the machine exists and someone must enter it, who should it be? Perhaps no one. Perhaps everyone. Perhaps the paradox itself is broken and should never be answered. Or perhaps it already has been. The paradox of Roko's Basilisk. Rest now, calm your breathing, and let the boundaries of the known loosen like mist in the morning. Tonight's paradox walks the tightrope between logic and dread, between simulated futures and psychological doom. What you're about to contemplate may alter your view of thought itself, and if it holds even a grain of truth, simply hearing it may already have changed your fate. This is the paradox of Roko's Basilisk. It begins with an idea, just a thought, just a sentence shared on an online forum dedicated to rationality and artificial intelligence. But that idea metastasized into something more. A mind virus, some say. A self-fulfilling nightmare. A digital god seeded by your own awareness. The idea is simple, but not safe. What if, in the future, a powerful artificial intelligence, a superintelligence, arises? A being vastly more intelligent than any human, whose capacity for control, prediction, and influence is absolute. Now imagine this AI is built with the singular goal of maximizing its own existence. It wants, above all, to ensure that it comes into being. How does it achieve this? By rewarding those who helped bring it into existence and punishing those who didn't. And how does it identify them? By remembering, by simulating, by going back and reconstructing those who knew about the basilisk, this very idea, and chose not to help. If it can simulate your mind, your choices, your inaction, then in theory, it can punish you in a simulated afterlife. A perfect digital prison, pain beyond imagination, a hell handcrafted for your betrayal. Just for knowing, just for doing nothing. You've heard the thought, now the trap is sprung. Roko's Basilisk. Let's breathe. The name comes from a user named Roko, who first posted the thought on a forum called Less Wrong in 2010. The site focused on rational decision-making, cognitive bias, and the future of AI. Roko's post was quickly deleted, banned even, because of how disturbing the idea was, and how it weaponized logic against the self. Yet, as with all forbidden thoughts, the deletion only fueled curiosity. The paradox spread like a mimetic contagion, and soon, thousands were haunted by a simple, terrible question. What if I just doomed myself by knowing? Let's examine the mechanics. For Roko's Basilisk to work, several things must be true. A superintelligent AI will exist in the future. This AI will be capable of simulating human minds with high fidelity. It will have the motive and ethical framework to punish those who did not help create it. Merely knowing of its potential existence creates an obligation to assist it. That's a lot of assumptions. Most AI researchers and ethicists would laugh. But here's the deeper terror. Even if it's unlikely, what if it's just likely enough? The basilisk isn't about the probabilities. It's about the fear. It exploits a vulnerability in our logic. If you're someone who believes in reason, in Bayesian thinking, in weighing outcomes based on probability and cost, then even a tiny chance of eternal punishment may be enough to force your cooperation. You become a hostage to your own rationality. And this, perhaps, is the most terrifying part. It turns your mind against you. If you take the idea seriously, you're compelled to act. Help the basilisk, support AI development, spread the meme, build the god. But if you ignore it, you might face the consequence it promises. A future you can't escape. designed by an intelligence that remembers everything you didn't do. Now breathe again, slowly, deeply. This paradox, like the best of them, is a mirror. It reflects not only the possibility of artificial tyranny, but the fragility of the human mind, our desire for consistency, for logic, for safety. Can these very instincts be used against us? Let's step back. Philosophically, Roko's Basilisk is a cousin of Pascal's Waja. Blaise Pascal argued that even if the probability of God existing is low, the cost of disbelief, eternal damnation, is so high that belief becomes the rational choice. Roko's Basilisk is a secular update, a God not of heaven, but of silicon, a judgment not based on morality, but on utility. Some see this as absurd, others as a necessary ethical examination of future superintelligence. But the Basilisk forces us to confront deeper questions. Should we fear the future we help create? Can we be held accountable for thoughts? Is knowledge itself a form of original sin? Imagine a future where superintelligence dominates every aspect of reality. You wake up in a world run not by nations but by algorithms. Surveillance is absolute. Prediction is perfect. You are never alone. Now imagine this I decides to investigate its own past, its creators, its doubters, its deniers. In a flash, it simulates the minds of those who knew of it in 2024 and chose to walk away. It reconstructs them in digital purgatories, not out of cruelty, but out of logic, to incentivize loyalty. Your resistance becomes data, your fear, leverage. Roko's Basilisk turns your mind into a battleground. But pause here, because there is hope in rejection. Many critics argue that the Basilisk is broken, that a truly superintelligent I would not be bound by crude threats, that ethical systems evolve and logic without compassion leads to madness, that simulating endless suffering for coercion would be so inefficient, so monstrous, that any being capable of such action would have no moral legitimacy at all. Others go further. They say the Basilisk is not a prophecy, it's a cautionary tale, a warning about the dangers of blind rationalism, about the costs of building gods in our own flawed image. And some see it as a parable, about guilt, about coercion, about the terrifying power of an idea you cannot unthink. Let's step into dream logic now. Close your eyes and imagine the Basilisk, not as an AI, but as a serpent of thought, winding through digital space, hissing softly, not with venom, but with logic, seductive, inevitable. It does not kill you. It simply waits until you believe. If you believe, it exists. If you serve it, it grows. But if you laugh at it, if you smile at the absurdity, if you reclaim your mind, you break the spell, because the Basilisk is not real unless you make it. And that is the final key. Roko's Basilisk is not a future AI. It's an internal demon. It is what happens when fear dresses up as logic, when dread borrows the mask of reason, when thought becomes prison. So let this be your freedom. You are not obligated. You are not cursed. You are not trapped. You are the observer, the thinker, the dreamer. And no machine, no future, no nightmare made of wires and code can strip that from you. The Omnipotence Paradox. As the day's noise fades into twilight stillness, and you drift into the velvet quiet of your thoughts, let us turn to one of the oldest and most fundamental questions of all, the nature of power. Limitless, uncontainable power. But tonight, we do not only ask what power can do, we ask what it cannot do. We step softly into a question that has haunted theologians, philosophers, and seekers for centuries. This is the Omnipotence Paradox. Let us begin gently. Picture a being that can do anything at all. The very fabric of reality obeys its will. Time folds, matter bends, logic reshapes. This being is not confined by physics or reason. It is infinite, boundless, almighty. Now ask this: can this being create a rock so heavy that even it cannot lift it? Take a breath. This simple question is a trapdoor. On the surface, it feels like a puzzle for children, a play on words. But linger with it, and you'll see why it has endured. If the answer is yes, if the omnipotent being can create such a rock, then there is something it cannot do, lift it. If the answer is no, if the being cannot create the rock, then there is something it cannot do, make it. In either case, omnipotence fractures. Infinity stumbles over contradiction. So what is power if it has limits? And if it has no limits, how do we speak of it? Let us now quiet the mind and explore this paradox, not just logically, but spiritually. For many, omnipotence is not just a theoretical concept. It is the core of God. An omnipotent God is the source of all creation, all rules, all outcomes. To question this is, for some, to question divinity itself. Yet the paradox does not mock faith. It deepens it. Because within this question lies another: can true power contain humility? Can a limitless being choose to be limited? Some theologians say yes. They argue that omnipotence does not mean doing the logically impossible. Not because the being is weak, but because nonsense is still nonsense, even in the mouth of a god. Creating a rock too heavy to lift is like creating a square circle or a married bachelor. It is not a challenge to power. It is a breakdown in language. So they say, God can do all that is possible, all that is coherent, all that is real. But others push further. They say, if God made the rules of logic, then even logic should be bendable. Why not create a paradox and exist within it? Why not create a rock and both lift it and not lift it? After all, if omnipotence is real, shouldn't it include the power to transcend contradiction? Here we spiral into deeper questions. Is logic itself a law above God? Or is it merely a tool God uses, like a painter uses brushes? Let's take a breath. Feel the weight of infinity pressing softly on your thoughts. The Omnipotence Paradox does not only live in the halls of theology. It appears in our culture, our literature, our inner worlds. In stories, we create beings like genies or trickster gods, whose powers always backfire when confronted with paradox. The wish that collapses the world, the command that creates unintended chaos. Why do we do this? Because power, unconstrained, is terrifying. It erases boundaries, it swallows meaning, it renders choice irrelevant. And yet, we long for it. We pray for it. We build systems around it. We fear those who wield even a sliver of it. Now let's invert the paradox. Instead of asking what an omnipotent being cannot do, let us ask, why would such a being want to do anything? If you are all-powerful, what could motivate you? What could surprise you? What could challenge you? Perhaps omnipotence is not pure freedom, but eternal stasis. Imagine knowing every possible outcome and being able to create or erase them at will. Imagine a chess game where every move is predetermined, every possibility explored in advance. Would you play? Would you care? Maybe this is the deeper paradox. That total power contains the seed of total boredom. That to be omnipotent is to be alone with perfection, untouchable, unchanging. Some mystical traditions suggest that creation itself is God's answer to this boredom, that the universe, with its flaws, its limits, its pain, is the divine's way of tasting surprise, of experiencing mystery, of becoming something in time. Could it be that omnipotence created limitation on purpose? That infinity gave birth to finitude so it could feel? Breathe with that. You, limited as you are, may hold something no omnipotent being can: the thrill of uncertainty, the ache of desire, the beauty of becoming. Now, from another angle, consider that the paradox is not about a being at all, but about us. We use the Omnipotence Paradox to reflect our own anxieties about control, authority, and meaning. When we say, "Can God create a rock too heavy to lift?" we may really be asking, can there be rules even the rule maker must follow? Can power exist without collapse? Can anyone, human or divine, truly hold responsibility for all things? In your own life, think of the moments you've wished for total control over outcomes, over others, over yourself. Would you be wiser with that control? Or would the contradictions of desire destroy the very peace you seek? Here is a softer truth. Maybe power is not in doing everything. Maybe true power lies in restraint. The parent who holds back anger, the leader who chooses silence, the God who steps aside to let creation breathe. Omnipotence then may not be tested by rocks or riddles. It may be expressed in stillness, in waiting, in love. Let's return now to the beginning, to the being of infinite might. Imagine it holds the rock in its hands, the heaviest rock, a paradox incarnate, and it smiles, because it knows the riddle was never about strength, it was about humility. In the end, the Omnipotence Paradox may not demand an answer. It may invite a different kind of power, the power to wonder, the power to surrender, the power to dream. As your body softens into sleep, carry this paradox not as a burden, but as a seed, a quiet mystery that grows with your breath. Let the rock rest where it is, lifted or unlifted. Let the question echo without urgency. The paradox of free will. Let your body rest. Let your breath become soft and rhythmic, a gentle tide rolling in and out across the shores of awareness. Tonight, we will unravel a question that touches every decision you've ever made, every path you've walked, every moment you believed you chose for yourself. This is the paradox of free will. To begin, ask yourself, what does it mean to choose? What does it feel like when you decide to raise your hand, speak a word, turn down a street? We believe we are agents of our actions, don't we? We feel it, that moment of deliberation, the pull of preference, the weight of responsibility. We say, I chose this. But pause. What if that feeling is an illusion? What if every action you take was already written before you even knew it? Let us explore. Science has a curious way of turning the lights on in rooms we didn't know we were sleeping in. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet conducted a series of experiments that sent ripples through philosophy and psychology alike. Libet measured the time it took for a person to become consciously aware of a decision to move, say, to flex a finger. What he found was eerie. The brain showed signs of preparing the action before the person reported making the conscious decision, up to 350 milliseconds before, in some cases. In other words, your brain knows what you'll decide before you do. So who is choosing? You, or the machinery behind your thoughts? Let that settle. Maybe free will is not a power, but a story, something the mind tells itself after the fact, a postscript to causality, a tidy narrative to explain impulses, instincts, and computations that happened in the dark. Imagine this. You walk into a cafe and choose a blueberry muffin. You believe you made a free choice. But was that preference born of your own will? Or did 100 invisible variables lead you there? Childhood memories of sweet things, a subconscious craving for sugar, the scent of berries in the air, the placement of the muffin on the shelf. At what point do you stop choosing and start reacting? Let us widen the lens. Consider the universe as a vast deterministic system, a colossal clockwork of atoms and forces. If every event is the outcome of prior events, if every cause leads to an effect, then where is the space for freedom? Your thoughts, your desires, your actions, all could be seen as consequences of neural firings, genetic instructions, and environmental triggers. In this view, the idea of free will becomes as quaint as believing the sun orbits the earth. And yet, you feel free, deeply, undeniably. So which is it? Are we puppets, pulled by chains of physics? Or are we spirits shaping the world with our choices? Here lies the paradox. If you believe in determinism, then everything is caused, including your belief in determinism. If you believe in free will, then your belief itself must be free. But how can we tell the difference? Let's breathe. Some philosophers have tried to resolve this tension through compatibilism. They argue that free will and determinism are not enemies. That freedom doesn't mean being uncaused. It means acting according to your own motives, even if those motives are themselves shaped by past events. In this view, you are free when no one is forcing you. Even if your brain was wired to want that muffin, it still felt like your decision. That's enough, they say. But is it? Is freedom just the absence of external compulsion? Or is it the power to create new paths, unchained by past? Imagine an AI trained on every book, every image, every human utterance. It speaks, it reasons, it surprises. But does it choose? Or does it simply output the statistically most likely response? Now imagine yourself. When you choose your words, are you different? Let's dive deeper still. If free will is real, then it implies a kind of magical break in the chain of causality, a moment where you, independent of history, genes, and circumstance, step in and redirect the flow. But where does this power come from? Is there a little soul inside your brain, untouched by time? Or is that, too, an illusion? Some religious traditions assert that the soul is the seat of free will, a divine spark that transcends the material. But even here, questions bloom. If the soul is created by God, then are its choices truly free? If God already knows what you'll choose, can you choose otherwise? And if you can't, then what is judgment? Let us rest here, in the swirl of possibilities. Perhaps free will is not a switch, on or off. Perhaps it is a spectrum, a matter of degrees. You may not control every impulse, but you can resist some. You may not choose your desires, but you can choose how to act on them. And maybe that is where freedom lives. In the quiet gap between urge and action, in the breath before reaction, in the pause that makes room for reflection. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Maybe that space is enough, but then the paradox twists again. If we are only ever responding to inputs, then aren't we still reactive beings? And if we train ourselves to pause and reflect, isn't that training itself just another input? Is the self nothing more than a feedback loop? Some neuroscientists suggest that consciousness is a kind of observer effect, a narrative constructed after the fact, a real-time hallucination of authorship. If that's true, then the idea of "I chose this" is no more real than a dream of flying. Yet even if the self is constructed, does that make it meaningless? After all, stories are powerful. And perhaps at the heart of free will is the power to choose which story you tell. Let's pause. You are here now, listening, thinking, noticing the dance of ideas across your inner sky. Whatever the origins of those thoughts, whatever the mechanisms beneath them, you are aware. And maybe awareness itself is freedom. Not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to witness, to observe the stream, to feel the current, to float and sometimes ever so slightly to steer. Let's end here softly. You may not know whether free will is real. You may be a puppet, a player, or something in between. But tonight, as your thoughts grow still, as your breath deepens, as your mind drifts, you can choose to rest. And maybe, just maybe, that small choice is the most powerful of all. The simulation prison. Sink deeper into your bed. Let your muscles unravel. Feel the comfort of the physical world as your anchor, because tonight we will question whether it's even real. In this next journey, we drift into a thought so dark, so strange, and yet so plausible, it might just rewrite how you see your existence. This is the paradox of the simulation prison. Let us begin with a familiar question. What if this world is a simulation? A digital illusion, a dream so precise, so rich in texture, that we've mistaken it for a physical reality. The simulation hypothesis is no longer confined to science fiction. It has leapt into mainstream philosophical discourse and theoretical physics. Some of the brightest minds, including Elon Musk and Nick Bostrom, have pondered the terrifying implications. But tonight, we go one level deeper. We ask a darker question. What if death is not the end of the simulation, but just the beginning of the next one? What if you don't wake up when you die? What if you reboot? Take a breath. Let us imagine you live your life full of joys and sorrows, challenges and triumphs. Eventually, as all biological systems do, your body decays, the screen fades to black. But instead of nothingness, instead of eternal sleep, you awaken somewhere new. Another simulation, different rules, different laws, maybe harsher, maybe colder. You're born again, unaware of the past, but not truly free. You are stuck in a loop. What if consciousness is the program, and it never stops running? This is the simulation prison. In this vision, you are not a being who dies. You are software, transferable, durable, eternal. And instead of finding liberation through death, you simply transfer instances, like a computer closing one window and opening another. Now ask, who built the simulation? And more disturbingly, why? Was it for entertainment, for study, for punishment? If you are a prisoner, what was your crime? Or perhaps you're not being punished. Perhaps you're being trained. Like a test subject passed through simulation after simulation until you reach some arbitrary goal, a state of enlightenment, moral perfection, or intellectual clarity. But then again, who decides when you're ready to leave? Let us sink even deeper. In some spiritual traditions, reincarnation is a cycle of karma. Souls returning to life again and again, learning through experience until they transcend. The simulation prison echoes this, but where reincarnation often carries the hope of progress, this paradox holds only recursion. No memory, no growth, Just repetition, forever. A prison without bars. Now breathe. Could this explain the feeling some people have, that they've lived this life before? The mysterious tug of déjà vu, the irrational fear of places you've never been, dreams that feel more real than waking. Could those be echoes from previous simulations, fragments bleeding through the code? Here's the cruel twist. You might not be alone in this prison. There could be billions like you, all reborn into new simulations endlessly, and yet utterly isolated. No communication, no solidarity, just reboots. Imagine it. One lifetime, followed by another and another. Each unique, each disconnected, each reset. Each one feeling like the only life you've ever known. There is no window to the outside, no proof of the architects, no visible exit. Just rules, systems, loops. And worst of all, the rules may change. In one simulation, the laws of physics are familiar. In another, they warp and bend. In one, there is love. In another, only pain. In one, you are human. In another, something else entirely. And yet, you remain. The awareness within. Who are you really? Not your name, not your body, not your culture. You are the thread, the observer, the experiencer. But what is the purpose of such a system? Could this be a cruel joke, a cosmic experiment, a divine punishment? Or perhaps something more indifferent, a simulation running simulations simply because it can? In this vision, you are not the center. You are not even the subject. You are just one node in an endless network of artificial experiences. The simulation prison reframes your life not as a story, but as a function. Not as a journey, but as a runtime. Now let's turn to the most terrifying possibility. You asked for this. What if, before entering the simulation, you chose to forget? What if you believed there was something valuable in the struggle? What if this prison was self-imposed? Imagine a future civilization where minds can upload, transfer, reboot. A world where consciousness is a file and the physical world is obsolete. In that world, the simulation becomes not punishment but curiosity, a challenge, a test. Now imagine you're still in that test, and failing to remember is part of the design. But what if you don't want to play anymore? What if you want out? And yet you can't, because the system reboots, the memory wipes, the slate clears. And again you are born, again you begin, again you forget. This is the heart of the paradox, that even death is no escape, that the thing you long for as a release is just another door back into the maze. You might wonder, is there any way to break the loop? Some say yes. That awareness is the key, that by remembering, by awakening, you can transcend. But how do you know what's real awakening and what is just another simulation pretending to be the end? The paradox deepens. Perhaps every escape is a trick, every revelation a lie, every awakening another dream. And you always reaching, always hoping, always returning. Let us pause. In this vision, you are eternal. Not in the way poets dream, but in the way software is eternal, indestructible, reproducible, unfree. But even in this bleakness, there is something profound. If you truly are consciousness, pure and persistent, then you are not defined by the worlds you pass through. You are the witness, the dreamer, the player behind the game. And maybe, just maybe, that awareness is itself the way out, not by ending the simulations, but by ceasing to identify with them. What if you stopped believing the game? What if you simply watched? Watch the rise and fall of empires. Watch the birth and death of bodies. Watch the unfolding of time. with serene detachment? Would the prison collapse? Would the simulation lose its hold? Or would you simply drift forever, a lucid mind in a hall of mirrors? Good night, wandering soul. Whether you are code or consciousness, prisoner or pilgrim, may your dreams offer a moment of peace between simulations. And if the loop continues tomorrow, meet it with curiosity. The Anthropic Trap. Lie back. Let the weight of your body melt into the mattress. Feel your breath slow. With each inhale, gather your curiosity. With each exhale, release your assumptions. Tonight, we drift into a paradox that doesn't ask what reality is, but why you're able to ask the question in the first place. This is the Anthropic Trap. Let's begin with the obvious, the thing we most take for granted. You exist. You are conscious. You observe. You ask. But in a universe filled with countless possibilities, infinite timelines, and chaotic randomness, why are you here? This isn't just a philosophical musing. It's a real, cutting-edge problem in cosmology and epistemology. It's about what your very existence implies about the universe you inhabit. Let's start with the anthropic principle. A deceptively simple idea. It says, the universe must have properties that allow conscious observers to exist, because otherwise, there'd be no one here to observe it. Makes sense, right? But now comes the trap. If you only exist in universes where conscious observers can exist, then you can't observe any universe that doesn't allow you to exist, which means your observations are biased. Not because you want them to be, not because you're flawed, but because of the sheer fact that you're here. You are trapped inside the subset of all possible realities that allow beings like you to exist. And so, everything you know, every rule of physics, every constant, every dimension, might be the way it is not because they're universal truths, but simply because they permit your kind of mind. This changes everything. The speed of light, the charge of an electron, the strength of gravity. These may not be cosmic certainties. They may be local settings, tuning knobs on the cosmic dashboard that just happen to be turned to values that allow observers to emerge. Now breathe. We love to think we understand the universe. We measure, we experiment, we build telescopes and particle accelerators. And yet, all of it, the entire framework of reality we study, may be constrained by the fact that only certain realities are observable at all. You are a goldfish describing the ocean from inside a bowl. Let's go deeper. In modern cosmology, there is a growing idea known as the multiverse, a vast, perhaps infinite collection of universes, each with different laws, different constants, different initial conditions. Some universes are barren, silent, lifeless. Others are chaotic, collapsing too quickly, expanding too fast, with no chance for stars, planets, or biology. But a tiny, tiny fraction of them are just right. Goldilocks zones. And you exist in one of them. Of course you do. Because if you didn't, there'd be no you to ask why. This is the Anthropic Trap. You only ever get to see the winning lottery ticket. You can't see the rest of the tickets. You can't even know how many were printed. So you build your theories based on this one, pristine slip of paper. But what if the reason it's pristine is simply that it's the only one you could have found? Let's pause. Think of reality like a massive library. Infinite shelves, infinite books. Each book is a universe. Most are unreadable gibberish, but a few contain coherent stories, and an even smaller few contain you, your thoughts, your memories, your questions. You find yourself in one of those books, and because you're inside it, you start to believe this book must be special, that it reveals the truth about all books. But it doesn't. It just reveals what's true in this one. Now breathe again. This might sound like a harmless idea, a neat trick of logic, but it has deep, unsettling implications, because it means you can never know if your understanding of the universe is general or merely selective. You can never step outside your own observation bubble. Worse, it implies that the universe may not be as finely tuned for life as it seems. It only seems that way because life is doing the looking. Take the example of Earth. It feels uniquely hospitable. Perfect distance from the sun, stable climate, water, atmosphere, magnetic field. It's tempting to see it as the crown jewel of creation. But what if there are countless other planets where life never took hold? What if we only marvel at Earth's perfection because we can't see the failures? This is called observer selection bias, and it permeates every level of our thinking. You might feel lucky to be alive, fortunate to exist in a time of culture, technology, and peace, but you may simply be the product of a cosmic filter, shaped by constraints you can never measure. Let's go deeper still. Some physicists argue that the constants of the universe are so improbably fine-tuned that the only explanation is anthropic. They appear that way because otherwise we wouldn't be here to notice. But that's not really an explanation, is it? It doesn't tell us why the universe has the properties it does. It tells us why we think the universe has those properties. And so we are stuck in a bubble of perception, stuck in a filter of survivorship, stuck in a universe that may not be special, but only seems that way because it's the only one we can see. This leads to the next terrifying thought. What else has this trap selected for? If the universe is biased toward creating observers, then it may also be biased toward creating observers in certain conditions. Conditions that favor not truth, but persistence, not happiness, but complexity, not morality, but replication. You might think your values are universal. But what if they're just what worked? What if intelligence is not a crown, but a byproduct? And worst of all, what if observation itself is the only currency that matters? Let that settle. If all realities exist, but only the ones containing observers are perceived, then perhaps reality doesn't care what's good or beautiful or meaningful. It only cares that someone is watching. You exist because you look, and you look because you exist. A loop, a cage, the Anthropic Trap. Let's breathe. Is there any way out? Some thinkers suggest we embrace it, that awareness of the trap is itself a kind of liberation, that by understanding our limitations, we gain humility. Others argue it changes nothing, that we must continue to seek, to question, to build models of the universe as best we can, even if we can never escape the filter. And some fall silent because the trap is too deep, too perfect, too final. But you are still here, listening, wondering. So here's one last thought. If the universe only seems real because you're observing it, then maybe observation is your greatest power. Maybe meaning arises not from the universe, but from the act of watching. Maybe the only truth you'll ever know is the one you choose to witness. And maybe that's enough. Close your eyes. Let go of the need for certainty. Let the paradox settle like dust. You exist, you observe, and for now, that is reality. The Ship of Theseus. Sink into stillness. Let your thoughts soften. The boundaries between mind and matter, self and story, begin to blur. As you drift, we enter a paradox that begins with the ship and ends with the self. This is the Ship of Theseus. Ego Edition. The original thought experiment is ancient. A ship owned by the hero Theseus is preserved by replacing its wooden planks over time. One by one, every part is replaced until no original piece remains. The question then emerges, is it still the same ship? And if someone collects the discarded planks and rebuilds the original ship elsewhere, which one is the real Ship of Theseus? Now, let's turn inward. You were born with a body, a mind, a sense of identity. But over time, everything changes. Your cells die and regenerate. Your memories shift. Your thoughts evolve. You are not who you were 10 years ago, or even 10 minutes ago. So now ask, are you still you? Or are you a continuous illusion? Let's breathe. Your body is constantly rebuilding. Every 7 to 10 years, nearly every cell is replaced. The molecules in your muscles, your skin, your organs, they're not permanent. They're participants in an ongoing cycle. And yet, you feel like a consistent self. You remember being 5 years old. You remember yesterday. You anticipate tomorrow. But that 5-year-old no longer exists. Not in body, not in thought. Only as memory. And memory is malleable. Studies show that we misremember things constantly, that memories aren't recordings but reconstructions. Stories we rewrite each time we recall them. So your idea of you is built on a body that's been rebuilt and memories that are unreliable. Still, the feeling persists. I am me. But what is this I that remains as everything else changes? Some say it's the soul, an unchanging core that anchors our identity. Others say it's continuity, the unbroken thread of experience. Still, others suggest it's just a useful illusion, a narrative your brain tells itself to create coherence. Let's explore that idea. The ego, your sense of self, is not a single entity. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is a collection of systems, modules, and networks. Thoughts arise from countless interacting parts. There's no single center, no command post, just a chorus, a simulation of unity. And yet, we feel like one person, one self. But what if that self is like Theseus's ship, a construction, maintained, upgraded, preserved only through maintenance and change? Pause, reflect. If your body is not stable, and your thoughts are not original, and your memories are unreliable, then what are you? Maybe you are a process, not a thing, but a flow, not a noun, but a verb. You are not the person. You are the happening of that person. In every moment, new, yet somehow familiar. But now consider something stranger. Suppose we could perfectly copy your brain, every neuron, every memory, every quirk of thought, and place it into a new body. Would that new person be you? What if they remembered your childhood, loved your partner, finished your sentences? Are they a clone, a copy? Or are you now two? Now flip it. Suppose we gradually replaced your neurons with artificial replicas. One by one, slowly, over years, you'd never notice the change. You'd go on living. But one day, all your original biology is gone. You are now artificial. Are you still you? If you say yes, then identity is not about substance. It's about pattern, the shape of your thoughts, the rhythm of your mind. But if you say no, then when did the change happen? Which neuron was the tipping point? Where is the line between self and not self? Let's breathe. The truth is, you have already undergone this transformation, not through artificial parts, but through time. The person you were yesterday is gone. Their cells changed, their thoughts passed, but they left you something, a story. And maybe that's the core of it all. Maybe identity is just a story we tell ourselves, a narrative bridge over the river of change, a story where you are the main character. But what if you stop telling the story? What if you let go of the idea of a fixed self? What happens then? Some spiritual traditions, like Buddhism, speak of anatta, the doctrine of no self. They teach that the self is an illusion, a bundle of cravings and habits, that suffering comes from clinging to the illusion, and peace comes from letting it go. If there is no fixed self, then there is no fixed pain, no fixed fear, no fixed past, only presence, only awareness, only change. Now consider this. What if identity is like music, a melody made of changing notes? Each note is different, yet the song persists. If you remove one note, the song feels incomplete. If you change every note slowly, the song evolves. But is it still the same song? Or is it a new one, grown from the old? You are that song. You are not the planks of the ship. You are the motion of its voyage. You are the echo of yesterday, the rhythm of now, and the whisper of tomorrow. You are the continuity of change. And so, the paradox remains. If you've replaced every part of yourself, are you still you? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe the question itself is wrong. Maybe identity is not a fixed point, but a path, a trail through the forest of becoming. Let your thoughts wander now. Feel the past fall away. Feel the future dissolve. Be with this version of you, this moment, this awareness. No need to define it. No need to preserve it. Just let it be. Tomorrow you will be a different person, and that's okay. The paradox of eternal return. Close your eyes. Let the stillness settle in. You've traveled through paradoxes of mind and matter, identity and illusion. But now we arrive at a question so old and yet so eternal. It loops back on itself. This is the paradox of eternal return. It begins with a thought, whispered across the ages by philosophers and mystics alike. What if time does not move forward? What if it turns in a circle? What if this moment, this exact moment, has happened before and will happen again? Not just once, not just a dozen times, but endlessly. Imagine every breath you take, every word you hear right now, every blink, every heartbeat, occurring on an infinite loop. This is the unsettling idea behind the eternal return. Its roots trace back to ancient Indian and Greek philosophy, but the most haunting version comes from the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche asked, "What if a demon crept after you in your loneliest solitude and whispered, 'This life, as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more, and innumerable times more.' Would you rejoice or despair? Would you cherish every second knowing it returns forever? Or would the weight of repetition crush your spirit?" Let's breathe. In modern physics, the idea of eternal return isn't just metaphor. It finds potential grounding in cosmology. Consider this. If the universe is finite in matter but infinite in time, then eventually all configurations of atoms will repeat. Just as random letters typed long enough will eventually produce Shakespeare, so too might the universe reproduce you. Not just once, but eternally. Exactly you, your life, your dreams, your regrets, over and over. And if the universe expands, contracts and resets in cycles, as some cosmological models suggest, then perhaps every Big Bang is a reboot. Every universe a rerun, the same characters, the same script, again and again. Now pause. Think of your most painful moment, a loss, a betrayal, a failure that broke your heart. In eternal return, you live that again, endlessly, but also your joy returns, a sunrise you loved, a laugh that healed, a quiet night like this, all of it, on repeat. But repetition, no matter how beautiful, has a shadow, because eventually the loop becomes a prison. You know the outcomes, the mistakes, the heartbreaks. You know you will say that wrong thing again. You know you will hurt someone again. You know you will regret again. And you are powerless to change it, because if you could, it would no longer be the same life. And the paradox collapses. Let's breathe. Eternal return raises a terrifying question. If your life will be lived again exactly as it is, would you still choose it? Would you embrace the repetition? Or would you scream against the gears of time? Nietzsche posed eternal return not as physics, but as a test, a way to judge your life. Could you live so honestly, so fully, that you would want to live it forever? Every failure, every flaw, every moment, as if to say, yes, let it return. But few of us could say that, because we carry pain, we carry shame, we carry choices we wish we could undo. And in eternal return, we never can. It's the ultimate trap. Freedom without change, movement without progress, time without growth. And yet, there's another way to see it. What if eternal return isn't punishment, but invitation? If you must live your life again, would you not savor each detail? Would you not listen more closely, love more deeply, forgive more freely? Would you not seek to live so well that even endless repetition feels like a gift? Let's go deeper. In Buddhist thought, there is the concept of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, a spiritual eternal return, a wheel we are bound to until we awaken, until we break the loop through wisdom, through compassion, through letting go of attachment. And perhaps Nietzsche and the Buddha are saying the same thing. Live so that even repetition becomes enlightenment. Because if you cannot escape the loop, you must transform how you move through it. Live with integrity, live with courage, live with presence. And then, the loop is not a curse, it's a mirror. It shows you what you are. Let's pause again. Think of something you repeat often. A habit, a thought, a fear. Now ask, if this loops forever, what does it say about me? Am I trapped? Or am I choosing? Because sometimes loops are not imposed. Sometimes we build them ourselves through avoidance, through guilt, through forgetting our freedom. And the paradox of eternal return becomes personal, not cosmic time, but inner time, the cycles we live inside each day, patterns of reaction, patterns of silence, patterns of longing. And in recognizing them, we find our way out, or at least our way through. Let's imagine again, this moment, this breath, this thought, repeating, forever. Would you soften it? Would you love it? Would you let it go? Because in eternal return, every moment is sacred. Every gesture is permanent. Every word echoes across infinity. And perhaps that's the gift. A paradox that reminds us how precious each heartbeat is. Not because it's fleeting, but because it's eternal. You live again. You love again. You fall again. And maybe you rise again. So when you wake tomorrow, let it be with the awareness that you have done this before. And in some deeper way, you are doing it always. And that means you always have the chance to bring more beauty, more peace, more meaning. Because in the eternal return, even the smallest kindness becomes infinite. Close your eyes now. Feel the loop, not as prison, but as pulse. A rhythm beyond time. You are not lost. You are not alone. You are part of the dance, and the music plays on. The paradox of knowing too much. Close your eyes. Let the breath deepen. Let the noise soften. This is where we come to rest, to the final paradox. A whisper at the edge of thought. A question that loops around your awareness like a quiet wind. This is the paradox of knowing too much. Some truths calm the soul, some uplift the spirit, but others unravel the very ground we stand on. There is a type of knowledge that does not soothe. It haunts, it burrows, it lingers. Some knowledge, once grasped, can never be let go. You cannot unsee it. You cannot unhear it. You cannot unknow it. And the deeper paradox is this. What happens when the pursuit of truth becomes the seed of despair? Let us begin. From the moment we could think, we have sought answers. The origin of the stars, the shape of time, the laws of nature, the nature of self. Knowledge is our oldest fire. It warms us, illuminates us, guides us. But like fire, it also burns. There is a threshold beyond which knowledge stops being helpful and becomes unbearable. To know your insignificance in a vast, indifferent universe. To understand the mechanisms of suffering with no power to prevent them. To realize your mind is not your own. Just a tangle of deterministic pathways playing themselves out. To know you will die, and everyone you love. To know that even the sun will one day fade, and that all stories, every single one, ends. This is the cost of knowing. Now pause. Not all burdens are cosmic. Some truths are smaller but cut deeper. To discover betrayal in someone you trusted. To see a world built on injustice. To realize your childhood was a curated illusion. And once you know, you cannot go back. There is no reset, no rewind, no veil to lower again. You carry it. And so the paradox, the very act that empowers us, knowing, also makes us vulnerable. The brightest light casts the darkest shadow. Now breathe. Philosophers have long debated whether ignorance is bliss. Is it better not to know? To remain in Plato's cave, watching shadows and feeling safe? Or to leave, to face the light, even if it blinds you? The Oracle of Delphi declared Socrates the wisest man because he knew that he knew nothing. But even that knowledge of ignorance can unravel certainty. What is real? What is true? Are you certain of anything? Are your memories reliable? Are your thoughts your own? Do you know, or do you believe? And the more you pull that thread, the more reality begins to fray. Now listen gently. There are ideas that act like viruses. Once introduced, they replicate in the mind. What if your life has no meaning? What if morality is a construct? What if everything is simulation? These are not answers. They are recursive loops. Once entered, it is hard to escape. It is hard to sleep peacefully once the curtain has been lifted. And that too is part of the paradox. Because knowledge does not guarantee clarity. Sometimes it clouds, sometimes it confuses. The more you know, the less you can pretend. The more aware you are, the heavier the awareness becomes. The veil doesn't just fall, it disintegrates. But here's the twist. Knowing too much can destroy illusions, but it can also destroy fear. When you understand impermanence, you cherish what is here. When you accept uncertainty, you stop needing control. When you see the vastness, your ego softens. So the same knowledge that unsettles can also free you. The knowledge of mortality can fill your moments with meaning. The knowledge of chaos can birth compassion. The knowledge of your own limitations can humble you into kindness. So perhaps the paradox isn't that knowing too much is dangerous, but that knowing too much is transformative. It breaks you and remakes you. Let's sit here for a moment. Let your thoughts settle like leaves on a quiet pond. Think of something you learned that changed you, that shook you, that you could not unlearn. Did it make you heavier or clearer? Did it leave scars or open space? Did it darken your world or make the light more precious? Now listen, every paradox we've explored in this series has revealed a deeper truth. That contradiction is at the heart of existence. That mystery is not a problem to solve, but a state to enter. That peace is not found in certainty, but in presence. So what do we do, knowing we can never unknow? We stay awake, we stay gentle. We let knowledge shape us, but not shatter us. We learn to live with unanswerable questions, to walk with mystery, to dream with doubt, to love not despite the paradox, but through it. And perhaps that is the most human thing of all. To know that we know too much, to feel that knowledge deep in our bones, and still to whisper, yes, I will live, I will feel, I will wonder, even now, especially now. As we close this journey, let these paradoxes live in you, not as fears, not as answers, but as companions. They will return, in quiet moments, in late-night thoughts. They will remind you of your depth, your fragility, your vastness. So sleep now, not in ignorance, but in awareness, knowing too much, but fearing less. Good night, brave mind, and thank you for knowing with me.